You're about to watch what we call an extended clip of the Young Turks, and the reality is it's somewhere in the middle. It's a little longer than our YouTube clips, but it's actually shorter than the whole 2-hour show, which you can get if you're a member. You can get it ad-free, and make sure you catch every news story we do that day. You're gonna love it as a full show. That's at tytnetwork.com/join. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to TYT, I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining me today is John Iadarola, who I haven't done the show with in a really long time, I feel like.
6 months.
Has it been 6 months?
And Trump wasn't president the last time we did it together.
No
we
way.
did it like a few Fridays ago. But yeah, it has been a while since we've done it, just me and you.
It has been a while, yes. And J.R. Jackson is in the studio as well. What's up, Jay?
What's going on?
JR rated.
All right, we have lots to get to today, including a quick update on North Korea, of course. But before we get to all of that, let's do a little announcement about exciting things that are happening here at TYT. As we've mentioned before, but in case some of you might have missed it, TYT is offering audio versions of all of its shows, including some of the YouTube TV shows. No Filter, the show that I host, is included. The Damage Report, which is the show you host, is included.
Not the last time I checked, but supposedly it's going to be.
It's going to be.
It's going to be.
So this
it
is. It
better be, I'll say that much.
Yes, and look, more importantly, I think it's more important. Nina Turner is doing a show with our network.
That's awesome.
And you can get audio of her show, We the People, at the TYT Audio Network. Just go to tyt.com/audio and you guys can check that out.
Yes.
Okay?
And I interviewed her about the launch of her new podcast, which either is available or will be available soon. It was a really good talk we had.
So we're getting the word out there about this offering, and I'm excited about it because I want to make sure that people can listen to our show if they don't have the ability to watch it. I know that I like to listen to podcasts instead of anything else when I'm on my way to work or going home from work. And it's a good way to catch up on things and listen to other shows and get different perspectives. All right.
I agree.
Cool.
I mostly just listen to reruns of my own show, actually.
Of course you do. I can't imagine you doing that.
No, I would never do.
All right, well, let's get right to it. Following Donald Trump's meeting with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, he is now essentially reassuring Americans that there is nothing to worry about, that in fact, the United States no longer faces a nuclear threat from North Korea. So he made these statements through a series of tweets, as he usually does, and I want to read those tweets to you and then give you, a little more follow-up information on this summit. So Trump had tweeted, quote, "Just landed a long trip, but everybody can now feel much safer than the day I took office. There is no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea. Meeting with Kim Jong-un was an interesting and very positive experience. North Korea has great potential for the future." Now, mind you,
that's a positive tweet from him. It's usually pretty negative, usually.
It was a positive tweet. Now, before we delve into the nuances of our commentary and what we think about all this, I just want to preface this entire conversation for anyone who isn't clear that we are in favor of diplomacy. We are in flavor of This is 1,000 times better than the way Trump handled the North Korea situation months ago when he was insulting Kim Jong-un, when he was mentioning the possibility of nuclear war, when he was talking about the size of his nuclear button in relation to Kim's nuclear button. This is a much better path. With that said, to make a statement in regard to North Korea no longer being a nuclear threat is irresponsible and it honestly not right. It's just not right because North Korea has done nothing yet. Nothing has been done yet. Okay, so North Korea as it stands is still a nuclear threat. However, the tensions have lessened, thankfully, because Trump decided to take this diplomatic route. So again, overall, this is good news, but let's not lose sight of what the reality of the situation is.
Yeah, the tension came down from where he raised it to earlier this year.
Exactly, so he escalated tensions, and since he had set expectations so low for everyone, now he's expecting to get a cookie because he's managed to de-escalate the situation a little bit.
Well, and also remember, in addition to the fire and fury tweets and the sort of social media provocation of North Korea last year, we also had reports from inside of the White House that they were considering a bloody nose strike, which means beginning a war with North Korea. And also bear in mind, he recently brought on to his crew John Bolton, a guy who desperately wants to bomb North Korea.
That's
right. He was
right.
at that meeting, actually, at the summit.
So again, overall, this is good news, but his statement makes me reminiscent of something that George W. Bush said during his tenure. This is a video from back in May of 2003. This was only a couple months after we had invaded Iraq. And he thought it was a good idea to give this mission accomplished speech, which he got a lot of criticism for by a lot of people on the left at the time, and then later by a lot of people in general. Take a look.
Thank you all very much. Admiral Kelly, Captain Card, officers and sailors of the USS Abraham Lincoln, my fellow Americans. Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
So in May of 2003, George W. Bush made it seem as though the mission in Iraq was a mission accomplished.
Well, things went pretty smoothly after that.
Yeah, everything was great. After that, there was this democratic uprising in Iraq, and we were able to bring all of our troops back. And of course, that's not how it worked out. Look, the point that I'm trying to make here is, again, the diplomacy is fantastic. However, there's a lot of hard work that lies ahead, and I don't want people to become complacent and just nod their heads and be like, yeah, that's it. Trump signed some deal that's incredibly vague. And look, to Trump's credit, they are planning on follow-up meetings to kind of hash out the details of this negotiation, and that's great. But let's not get complacent because, again, there's a lot of hard work that lies ahead, and the agreement that was signed was not as detailed as agreements that were signed with North Korea previously, and they reneged on those agreements. So we'll see how this develops moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And look, when he comes back, and one of the first things he says is they are no longer a nuclear threat. We've got this whole thing, it's all wrapped up. You then have to ask yourself, does this seem like the actions of a man who cares about the substance of denuclearization, or do they seem like the actions of a person who wants to be perceived to have had a win? Seems like the former, the latter, I should say. And bear in mind, this is a guy who has lied to us more times than anyone can possibly count about things ranging from the most shallow to the most substantive. Most recently, he had been lying about protecting people with pre-existing conditions. So anyone who is saying at this point that our obligation as members of the media is to stand up and begin applauding with our eyes closed at anything the government happens to say to us this week doesn't understand what the purpose of a free and independent media is.
Well, I think the response to this agreement that was signed by Kim Jong-un and Trump has been, it's either good or bad. You're not allowed to talk about how much you support diplomacy, but also simultaneously criticize the vagueness of that agreement. Because if you do that in this weird topsy-turvy, no nuance allowed world, you're against it. You're against diplomacy. You want to nuke North Korea. You want to engage in nuclear war. Of course that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, look, of the people who are uniformly just in favor of it, you have the state media, Fox News. You have that. So if you want people who are just going to be a chorus of applause for Trump, you have that. I actually don't know if there's anyone who represents the sort of straw man, this person secretly really wants war with North Korea, except possibly John Bolton and people like him, other people that are surrounding Donald Trump. Everyone else is attempting to be realistic and actually look at the content of the agreement and then think about the possibilities that going forward, what is actually likely to happen. And by the way, it's easy to sort of to look at what's on MSNBC and Fox News, or to maybe do a brief browse of Twitter and get sort of a false idea of what the American people actually think about this. I've looked at the polls, and slightly more than 50% approve of the way he's handling the situation with North Korea, which is good.
That is good,
and this is certainly a better way than it was last year when he was launching Twitter threats to them. And 25% of the country believes that this will actually lead to denuclearization, which means that a significant number of Republicans don't even believe that that will happen. And those people deserve representation in media as well. By the way, almost every single one of those people doesn't want to see any kind of conflict with North Korea. They just also don't believe that Donald Trump is being realistic or honest about what's likely to happen.
Right, and I think having Trump be realistic about the situation is important, but I want him to approach this with skepticism and openness, if you get what I mean. I don't want him to be hostile toward the North Koreans and Kim Jong-un because you're not going to get a deal if you approach it from that perspective.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
But his commentary in regard to Kim Jong-un has come off as incredibly naive. I trust him. I trust him. You know, but that's not good enough. You need to be a good negotiator and ensure that there are specifics in the finalized agreement. You need to have a timetable. We need to define what denuclearization means in the context of North Korea. Because denuclearization in the context of North Korea might be completely different from, let's say, the nuclear deal with Iran. Because we don't have all the information necessary to understand the situation with North Korea. Remember, they've been isolated. So our intelligence with North Korea has been limited. So these are all complicated issues. And as I mentioned, you need to focus on the hard work ahead rather than congratulating yourself and making it seem as though North Korea doesn't pose a threat anymore. Finally, one thing that I came across that I thought was fascinating because it gives you, it was foreshadowing for me at least. It gives you a sense of some of the potential disagreements moving forward between the United States and North Korea. So, of course, the state-sponsored media in North Korea responded to this agreement. And here's something that I found. Kim's vows to denuclearize were reported by state media Wednesday within that context that Pyongyang would respond to easing of what it sees as the U.S. hostile policy against it with commensurate but gradual moves toward the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So, A, it's really good that they're really seriously considering denuclearization. That's what that report tells me. But more importantly, who's going to act first? It seems as though, as it stands now, North Korea is expecting the United States to act first, right? Stop with the war games. You start lifting some of those sanctions, and then we'll start denuclearizing. No, I don't think that the U.S. is going to be in favor of that.
Well, we did end the military exercises, I guess, without even talking to South Korea or our military about it.
Right.
So I guess we did act first.
Right. Well, here's the thing. We haven't actually put action behind Trump's words. From my understanding, South Korea will continue with these military exercises until they get specific orders from the Trump administration to stop, right? But Trump just said it. And so South Korea's response to that has been interesting because they said, we're going to continue until we get direct orders. But more importantly, they've been very hesitant to criticize Trump for that, because they know that sometimes Trump says things without putting action behind it. So who knows?
He just comes up with something and then doesn't actually pursue it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to say, I know there was a lot of talk about the way that Donald Trump spoke about the leadership of North Korea seemed kind of tone deaf in regard to their human rights abuses in the past. And look, I will say that going into this first meeting, I understand why Donald Trump is not going to sit down and then scream at him, why are you starving hundreds of thousands, if not millions of your people? Why do you have death camps and concentration camps? Why are you doing summary executions based on religion and politics and all of that? The first meeting, you're not going to do that. I understand that. That would cut off the entire process. But the idea that you would proceed in the future without making it a part of it, that at some point, in addition to the other things that we expect to get, including denuclearization and the things that we will give, one thing that we should expect to get is human rights improvements for the people of North Korea. I am not only interested in North Korea no longer threatening constantly to kill the people living in Seoul, I also care about the millions of people living in North Korea in literally the worst conditions on earth. I care about those people as well. And so that has to be a part of this process. That is a core progressive value that can't be jettisoned just for ease of negotiations.
So I hear what you're saying, and overall I agree with you. Yesterday when we did coverage of the summit, there were two main criticisms from some audience members, right? I think one of the criticisms was incredibly unfair because it assumed that we're in favor of nuking North Korea because we criticized how vague that deal was. That was unfair. But what was fair was how naive I am in thinking that someone who commits human rights abuses himself would really genuinely care about the human rights abuses in North Korea. I mean, think about the brutality that people seeking asylum are facing under the Trump administration. He does. Look, obviously this is my speculation that's based on some of his own policies, but I don't think that those human rights abuses are really his priority.
No. And I've interviewed people who've escaped from North Korea. Like I've heard about their experiences. Maybe Donald Trump has atypical compassion and empathy that hasn't been reflected in the rest of his life. But I think it's more likely that he just wants to win. So wants a win. So best case scenario, he happens to stumble into actual peace as a result of wanting good PR. That is what we should be hoping for the best interest of the people of North and South Korea.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to some other news, somewhat related. Iran has just announced that it plans to begin its uranium enrichment program at a particular plant that it had previously agreed to close down in the Iran nuclear deal. But there might be a silver lining in this story, so just stay with me for a second. According to reports, Iran will begin uranium enrichment at its Fordo plant and will install new nuclear equipment at the Natanz facility if it withdraws from a nuclear deal with major powers. Now, clearly the United States has already withdrawn from that nuclear deal. That was a huge story a few weeks ago. However, the other international players who have signed on to that deal are fighting pretty aggressively to keep the deal intact. Those countries include Russia, China, Germany, Britain, and France. Now, according to a spokesperson with the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, currently the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has ordered that the programs be carried out within the parameters of the nuclear deal. So far, even though they're announcing that they're going to be enriching their uranium, they're going to be doing it in the confines of this deal. What they're trying to message here is, we don't like what Trump did. There is a possibility that this entire deal will fall apart as a result of what Trump did. However, there's a possibility that we'll maintain this deal as long as the other powers that are involved work with us. So let's give you another statement. And when he, meaning the Ayatollah, when he gives the order, we will announce the programs for operating outside of the nuclear deal and reviewing this plant, or reviving this particular plant. Also, President Hassan Rouhani expressed delight with the stance adopted so far by European countries, including France, to preserve this joint comprehensive plan of action. So look, there's still hope for this nuclear deal, and maybe I'm being naive and feeling a little bit of this hope, but there are other countries that are fighting pretty aggressively to maintain it, and that's good news.
Yeah, it's a good consequence of the fact that this was a meticulously negotiated multilateral agreement over the course of a decade with all of those countries, and that's one thing that we have going for us. Of course, we do have to acknowledge that in yet another area, we have withdrawn our influence, our ability to try to, in some cases, make the world a better place. Thankfully, the countries that are stepping up into roles of leadership in the world will be able to do that. And I hope for, in terms of regional security and all of that Iran does stay within the deal. It seems unlikely, considering the sanctions that we're going to reimpose on them. And even inside of the deal, by the way, so they talk about resuming enrichment. you can enrich uranium, just not up to a certain level. I think it's something like 3.69% or something like that. So they can do it within those confines. It's just once they try to produce highly enriched uranium that would be weapons grade, that becomes a gigantic problem and obviously violates the deal. With the prospect of that possibility on the horizon, it is amazing that Donald Trump, in perhaps amongst all of the Orwellian things that he has done, there has been nothing more Orwellian than we are going to pull out of the Iran nuclear accords to stop them from having nuclear weapons. It is something that almost directly, obviously, will lead us down a path where they end up with nukes. That is the obvious result of it. If you have looked into what the Iran nuclear accords actually produced, which is cutting out far more than 90% of all the highly enriched uranium that they have, cutting out almost all of their centrifuges, especially the newer ones that are capable of producing weapons-grade uranium. The idea that shredding that produces a less weapons-capable Iran makes no sense to anyone who knows anything about nuclear weapons or nuclear weapon development.
Also, this whole story just really points to the cognitive dissonance of those who support Trump and his efforts in North Korea, yet think that the Iran nuclear deal was a terrible one. As you guys know, the Iran nuclear deal was very specific. It had a very specific timetable. It had very specific verification, and it essentially gave the United States and all these other world leaders what they wanted. Now, there was no discussion about
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your active ID more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
Dismantling their missiles programs. That was not part of the discussion. That's something that was brought up by Trump and the naysayers later. This was all about ensuring that Iran didn't create a nuclear weapon. That was the whole point. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, you know what? We want them to also stop building these weapons, and we want them to stop funding these, terrorist organizations throughout the world. Those are lofty goals, and I understand the reasoning behind it. But for the purposes of nuclear war and preventing the development of nuclear weapons, this was a great deal, and it was certainly much more specific and detailed than the agreement or statement that was signed by Trump and Kim Jong-un. Now, I hope that further negotiations with Kim Jong-un will lead to a more detailed agreement. But people want to applaud Trump for what he just did with North Korea, while also applauding him for doing something that could potentially lead to nuclear development in Iran.
Yeah, if we are lucky, after many meetings and probably years of diplomacy between the US and North Korea, if we are lucky, what we will get is something like the Iran nuclear accords, but for North Korea.
Right.
If we're lucky, we will have officials from the Atomic Energy Agency going around and looking at their facilities and mapping out all of their capabilities and verifying it. Even the Trump administration going throughout Iran and verifying that they are in compliance with the deal. If we are lucky, we will end up with that same thing in North Korea. And at that point, Sean Hannity will applaud, while of course having attacked the Iran version of it this entire time.
Yeah.
We live in a ridiculous world where nothing is true and nothing matters.
Yeah, I feel that stress every day.
Those things that are true, that's how an insular world works. So you have one president who, by the way, it's also not talked about how there was multiple countries involved with the Iran deal. If you just talk to any random American who's listening to what the president says, you would think this is an America and Iran deal that Obama came and just put into place and gave away the house to. No one talks about how these other countries were involved, first of all. But then where is the one-on-one thing that happened a couple days ago or day or two ago with Kim Jong-un was just 2 guys talking, and then suddenly none of the details are there, but he can say, we'll have people in there, trust me. Or it'll come together, trust me. And that lack of details, you believe the one strongman who's saying all that, and also believe him in saying that the deal that had details to it had nothing to it. It's just you devoid yourself of all fact and follow just with what the guy says.
It's the power of messaging, and Trump has really mastered that skill. I mean, he lies, and his lies, they don't even go unchecked. I mean, you will have fact checkers proving that what he's saying is just an outright lie, and somehow his messaging is so powerful that it'll overcome that fact checking.
He tweeted that 500 days ago we were at the brink of war with North Korea. Were we? Do you remember that? And 500 days ago? Were we about to go to war with North Korea? No, the only time that there has been actual fear that something could develop was in response to his tweets against North Korea, which was not 500 days ago. It was during his first year of the presidency. And it's amazing. 500 days ago, we were ready to go to war with East Asia. We were always ready to go to war with East Asia and Eurasia. And whatever the facts need to be for his current thing, please read Orwell. It'll help you understand Donald Trump's administration much better.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to his followers one bit that there is no truth to it.
Yeah. Well, his strategy is to set expectations low.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what happened. You scare everyone with potential nuclear war with North Korea, and the second he does something a little diplomatic, everyone, by the way, across the political spectrums, give him a cookie. But again,
we'll give him the cookie.
I give him the cookie for a diplomatic approach, but you got to hold his feet to the fire and ensure that he does what's necessary to denuclearize North Korea.
Yes. Yes.
All right, we got to take our first break. Let's do that. And when we come back, some more international news, including a pretty devastating story from Yemen.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. You're only halfway through, so hold, stay right here. Just want to remind you, if you want to get all 5 segments of the Young Turks commercial free, these are just 2 of them. Every day we do it. So go to tytnetwork.com/join, and you'll get the whole 5 segments, 2 hours, ad free. Do it now.
Everybody, welcome back to TYT. Anna and Mark Thompson with you.
Hi,
Mark,
everybody.
Mark, you love doing the show.
I do. Just us girls. This is the way I like it.
I love having you on. It's awesome, and the audience does too. So.
Oh, thank you. It's really fun to be here. So.
All right, so I wanted to make a quick announcement and ask you guys for a little bit of help to support a fellow independent outlet, and that is a magazine. It's a digital magazine that was founded by one of our guest hosts who came on the panel last Friday, actually. Where Your Voice magazine is an independent platform, and the whole purpose is to help support marginalized women, spread their voice, spread their message, and empower them. It's an incredibly important magazine, and it really does help young women, feel empowered to speak out about issues that matter to them. If you are interested in helping support this platform, go to Patreon/WhereYourVoice, and you can donate. Anything would help. It is completely funded by its founder, and so that's not a sustainable model, and they really do need your support. So if you can help, again, it's Patreon, and the name of the magazine is Where Your Voice. All right, you ready for some news?
Let's do it.
All right. No shortage of Nazis in the news these days. Unfortunately, we got to start off with that. Representative Steve King has just retweeted a well-known neo-Nazi, or at least an individual who is known to be a neo-Nazi, and the Republican Party has remained largely silent about it. In fact, when Talking Points Memo reached out to specific individuals in the GOP, they refused to respond to requests for a statement. Now, the tweet in question has to do with Italy and the political situation in Italy and migration to Italy. But before I get to that, let me explain who had initially tweeted this and who Steve King retweeted. It's a man by the name of Mark Collette, and he isn't quiet about who he is. He called himself a Nazi sympathizer, expressed admiration for Adolf Hitler, and was the subject of a 2002 documentary called Young Nazi and Proud. So with that said, now that you know a little bit about Collette, let's take a quick look at the tweet that Steve King had retweeted. And it's about the situation in Italy. There is this there's this trend of countries wanting to reject migration. That's certainly the case in Italy, where where populist right-wing politicians are certainly gaining a lot of momentum. And so it was an anti-immigration tweet. And King has said that, he's not necessarily against this line of thinking. Let's give you some more details. Colette joined former KKK Grand Wizard David Duke for an hour-long discussion on, per Duke's website, the massive violence that continues to be inflicted on the world by the Jewish-dominated left. But right now, what we're seeing with the GOP is a number of representatives and senators who fall in line with the Trump rhetoric toward minorities and undocumented immigrants, because it's the politically savvy thing to do at the moment. You have this wave of right-wing hatred toward immigrants, toward black people. I mean, it's open, it's out in the open. We shouldn't apologize for slavery. You're not going to condemn those types of statements?
I mean, that statement is indefensible on any level. It's indefensible morally, it's indefensible ethically, and it's indefensible just in terms of the facts of the nation. What slavery did, the awful pernicious elements that were birthed by slavery. It was a horrible part of this history. So even if you don't care about black people, even if you don't care about this horror that was perpetrated on this population, it's indefensible intellectually in terms of this country and what it did.
And then
throw all his anti-Semitic comments onto the fire.
And the incredible thing is, you will still have people go on shows like former employees here who have gone on Joe Rogan's show, claim that there is no racism in the right wing. There's no racism in the Republican Party whatsoever. We just read you comments and showed you retweets from a Republican representative who is currently serving in the GOP. I mean, okay.
Well,
we could live in this weird fantasy world where we deny that this exists, but it exists. It's out in the open, it's brazen, and it's a winning political strategy right now for the GOP.
And I think that's the real reason that you don't see more in the way of a denouncing of these kinds of comments. And in the run-up to the election, you'll remember Trump was sort of an outcast, or they sort of gave him the side eye in the GOP. Now they see how Trump is actually a winner, how his tough talk and brutal talk and disgusting talk about minorities has actually been an effective political tool. So not only are they saying these things more openly, but they're not denouncing this when it's this
so
is
what do we do?
open anti-Semitism and racism.
What do we do when there's a portion of the country, that will only support Republican candidates who fall in line with Trump's rhetoric on minorities? What do we do? That's what they want. I mean, in a democracy, they have a voice. Their voice is just as equal as the voices who condemn and denounce this.
Well, the good news is that the majority of the country is not like this. The majority of this country doesn't embrace that ideology. The majority of this country truly doesn't have, I think, racism and anti-Semitism at their core. I do think you have to turn a light on it, which we're doing here. And I think you have to continually associate that party with this kind of talk. Continually associate this party, that's the GOP, with that ideology. Now, you may be Republican, I hate to paint with too broad a brush, but at some point, if your GOP legislators are not going to denounce this kind of thing, then they have to suffer the consequences.
Well, remember, the reporter specifically reached out to Republican leadership for comment on this, and they refused to denounce this type of behavior.
Which is why
right?
I say the GOP has to own it.
So I think, yes, I agree with you on that. And more importantly, I hear you when you say you don't want to paint too broad a brush, because I do not believe that all Republicans are racist or bigots or xenophobes. I do not believe that. But you have to take action as a Republican voter if you do condemn this type of behavior and vote these kinds of people out of office.
Yes.
Right? Demand change from the Republican leadership.
In the same way that Democrats have to demand more of the Democratic Party, and we talk about that, and getting rid of superdelegates and making other changes in the party that we will discuss. But in the same way that we have to hold the Democrats responsible for flaws in the party, we have to hold Republicans responsible for this sort of heinous talk. It's absolutely unacceptable. And you talk about Italy became in essence a vessel for all of those people fleeing Syria and Iraq, Greece, Italy, and even into Germany. And so they point to that as some sort of bad thing. But actually, some of the stories out of Italy about how towns in southern Italy that were really on the verge of teetering, on the verge of economic decline and disrepair, were essentially reinvigorated by the flow of immigrants. So even on the substance, I don't think they're even right. But the whole thing is so hateful to its core. Yes, Anna's right. These people have to be voted out of office.
Yeah. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, just an update on what happened last night in the primaries and how challenging Trump as a Republican could mean political suicide.
Thanks for watching what I hope was a lovely edition of the Young Turks. Now, you know that is 2 of the 5 segments that we do because that's free. We want to have you support independent media and come watch the whole show that we do every day. That's 5 segments overall, no ads at all. That's at tytnetwork.com/join. Come become a member. Thanks for watching either way. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.